Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to get started for the lectures of today. Last week, you had a pre-recorded lecture. The assignment was posted on Blackboard, and I had asked a question. So for those of you some of you, I think, emailed me with the answer to the question I asked. You just have to put that in for your phrases. So when you're sending me at the end of the semester, once you have 9 phrases, which you should be pretty close now, once you have those 9 phrases for last week's class, you'll just put the answer to the question I asked. And that will count as your attendance purposes for the week of April, what was it? April 19th. So does anybody have any questions about the contents of the material from chapter 22 and 24? Before I move on to chapter 25, that's what we're on for today, chapter 25, 26, and 27, which again, they're not long chapters, and I don't go into that much detail in them because I don't know if they're as relevant today as they were, some time ago. If nobody has any questions, I'm going to go straight into the lecture. Anybody? No? Once, twice? Okay, hold on. Let's see here. Bear with me a minute. My computer's, let's see here. Okay. Okay, so chapter 25 is transfer and holder in due course. And it talks about when we're transferring assets, and we're transferring in particular like a check. And the reason I don't spend as much time on that nowadays as I did, when I first started lecturing is this: I'm noticing a trend over the past couple of years, the last year, the last 2 years, and I think it's much more prevalent as a result of COVID, the use of electronic means to transfer assets. So people are using Venmo a lot more. People are using Zelle a lot more. There's all these instant transfers now. And so when we talk about a transfer in due course or a holder in due course, I don't think it's as relevant today as it was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even maybe 5 years ago. It's predominantly when we're talking about, checks that are being written, and it's about that negotiable instrument that is being used from one person to the other. And when you have that negotiable instrument, predominantly a check, what happens when you're transferring that check from one person to the other? Give me 1 second. This is work. Court, again, not supposed to be working. Okay, great. Whatever. Okay, so does anybody here in this class, I don't know if you can give me a show of fake hands or real hands if you're on, have you used or written a check, not like an actual check with a pen and paper? Have you used that within the past 12 months? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4. 4 out of 29, and maybe 5. Yeah. So at best, I have 1/5 of the class that have used a check. Most people now, what are you using? If you want to speak or if you want to write it in the chat, what are you using if you need to transfer money from you as a holder of the account or that money, the asset, to somebody else?
Zelle,
Cash App.
electronic transfers, Venmo. Now
Venmo,
there's too
Cash App.
many things actually. Even through Facebook, I heard people do it.
Yeah, you can pay. I think I haven't used Facebook. I use it to like pay random other stuff. But yeah, Zelle, Venmo. There's a lot of cash apps out there. And then what's a new development that's happening is, just the mere definition of cash. It's changing also. We also now have cryptocurrency. And when I logged into my PayPal recently, I noticed that there's a way you can pay with cryptocurrency. And for the first time in my life, I had to pay. I got an invoice from someone for some services rendered, and in his um, invoice, he said we can pay cash, check, Venmo, or Bitcoin. And I had never seen that before, and I thought that was very interesting. So when I saw him, I was like, "That's so interesting." And he told me, I was like, because he's an older gentleman, so I was surprised that he was involved with Bitcoin. And he said that his dad bought it. He bought 21 coins of it about 10 years ago, and he had bought and sold since. But his father, the guy's got to be like way older, because this one is probably in his 60s, 70s. So his dad's like, I don't know, 80, I don't even know, had given him and his sister 2 coins each. So the value of that as of today, it's 50,000 a coin, $50,000 worth. So just 2 coins is 100K, which is incredible. I think a month ago it was like 63,000 it hit. So again, we're dealing with these concepts of money that's different from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and that we're moving in that direction. So that's why, with this material, I don't spend as much time on it, and I don't test on it as much, because I don't know the relevancy for this particular, I guess, generation. But with that being said, I will give you some information. When we talk about an endorsement, the word endorsement, INDORSEMENT, or endorsement, that just means when you are signing the back of that instrument. And when I talk about the instrument, or when the textbook talks about the instrument, it's referring to a check. So that check that's being negotiated, that check that's being transferred, that physical check, is it's a piece of paper, right? And when we talk about negotiation of that instrument, we just simply mean the transfer of this document. So negotiation is that transfer. And when we talk about um, the endorsement of that instrument, we're talking about that signature on the back. When we talk about back in the day, the formal requirement of endorsement, it just means it's signed in black or blue ink. Again, today, you sign electronically, you take a picture, it's deposited in there, you're not going into the bank. I mean, you can, but it's just a little bit different. When we talk about notice when it comes to checks, it's different, or there's some similarities, I guess. When you're sending somebody money, and I'm going to try to kind of liken it to what's happening today, right? So if you send somebody a check back in the day, you should have verified the information. You should know who this person is, who's getting this money, and what identity that they have. Today, when you're sending money electronically through Venmo, it asks you, are you sure that this is the person you want to send it to? Because once you send this, you're not going to be able to get that back. So are you sure that, maybe this person's not in your contact list or whatever reason? So you have the burden as the holder of the money, of the assets, to know who you're sending it to. Are there scams out there? Absolutely. And today there's scams with things like Venmo and Zelle and all that stuff, like there were with checks. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, a common thing was, and I don't even know, do people use Craigslist as much as they used to now? As they used to back, nobody uses Craigslist, right? Back in the day, which wasn't that long ago, people would go on Craigslist, and let's say you want to sell furniture, you want to sell a car, you would post that on Craigslist. And so then a possible purchaser, there's still scams with checks. Okay, that's good to know. So I'm still kind of in touch with what's happening with the world. With Craigslist, somebody would contact you, say, hey, I saw your posting, you wanted to sell this car, this furniture, whatnot. I'm too busy to come and see it, but I'm interested in buying it. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to pay more than the price that you wanted for it, but I'm not going to be able to get it. I'm going to have my people come and pick up the car, the furniture, whatever it is. I'm going to send you a check in the mail. I just want you to give me that difference or whatever it is, send it back to me via wire. And that in itself was actually a scam, because you would be sent a check, you would deposit it, the bank would accept it, you think you're in the clear, except it would take 10 to 14 days for the bank to try to get those assets now from that person who gave it to you, to realize there's no account there. It would bounce. And by that time, you've already wired money from your account to this other person, that difference. And then when you try to find them, they're not they're not contacting you back, they're in a different country or whatnot. And so right now, I know my husband sometimes gets these requests on Venmo to pay this bill or that bill. I would like to say that that's the equivalent of those scams. You should never send money to anybody that you don't know for a transaction that you're not aware of, because um, that might be just a different way to scam people. It's a different way to get one over it. And you may think that, well, I'm too smart for this or too savvy. There's a lot of people that have fallen for those types of things, and they're so hard to trace that you're not going to be able to get your money back. And so that's why it's so important to do your due diligence, to kind of look into things further and not give your money or transfer. I know, it's especially nowadays, it's so easy to transfer money from one person to the other. It's literally a click of a button. You don't even have to write out anything, bam, and then that money sent. But with that, you also have that responsibility to make sure that whoever you're sending that money to is in fact the person you think it is. Um, this is called the notice aspect. This is listening. If you know that you are receiving a check or you're receiving money and there's a problem with it, you're exposing yourself to a lawsuit. And a person is exposed to a lawsuit when they have noticed that there's an actual problem, or has been given notice that there may be an actual problem, or from the facts and circumstances that there's a reason to believe that there is a problem. If you suspect that there's some kind of fraudulent activity, that's the equivalent of you having notice of, hey, there's a problem here, there's something that's not right here. So then you're exposing yourself to potential liability, whether it's a criminal sense or whether it's a civil sense. If you're getting sued, I always say, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. So nobody's going to give away money for free. Nobody wants to help people in general, right? Like, that's not how things work, unfortunately. So when it comes to funds and assets of that sort, just be very careful, because you could actually be found liable for things of that sort. Let me just make sure. I want to ask about the case of Watson Coding versus American Express. I just want to make sure that I put that on your syllabus.
You did.
I did. Okay, excellent. Does anybody read it and would like to tell us about it?
I did.
I can.
Okay. Anna, you want to tell us?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So there's was this woman, Christine Mayfield. She worked for Watson Coding for around 10 years, and she had the authority to write checks from the company's checking account. So, but the company Watson did not give um, Christine any type of restrictions when it came to writing the checks, and um, so her only responsibility was reconciling the company's checkbooks with the bank statement. And Carol Watson was one of the owners. She delivered unopened bank statements to Christine Mayfield, but she never reviewed them or sat down with Mayfield to reconcile the accounts. But Mayfield wrote around, well, a lot of checks totaling around approximately $700,000
Mhm.
from Watson's corporate account to an American Express account for her personal debt. But the company Watson informed the American Express of the fraud that Mayfield was committing. And after firing Christine, Watson proceeded to file a lawsuit to recover the funds from American Express, but he lost.
They lost. Exactly. Do you remember why they lost?
It wasn't American Express fault because she wrote the checks from an account that had
Right.
funds. So
Right.
she did everything right.
Exactly. There was no reason for American Express to question the authenticity of these checks. It wasn't like it was fraudulent checks. They had a person who was authorized to write checks. They send bills. They don't care who is paying them. There was no reason. And so, unless there's a reason to suspect wrongdoing, you're going to take everything as everything is done properly. The court is actually the same way. When I first started, I was like a detective. I'm busy right now. Gotta wait. When I first started, any application or petition that come in, I would question it. Well, how do we know that this is an accurate signature? Blah, blah, blah. And I was told we take everything at face value. We don't question anything unless there's a reason to suspect it. If you know that this petitioner that signed this document is actually dead because it's a friend of yours, then there's a legitimate reason for you to question it. Otherwise, there's no reason to question these things. And so it's the same with this particular case. American Express gave bills, sent out bills. They received those checks from an authorized representative of this company. It's the company's fault for not double checking, for not verifying. They were getting the statements. The bills came out of their accounts. Why were they not looking to make sure? And this is something really important for you, like young people as well. Whatever statements that you get, make sure you're looking at your bank statements. That way you can catch, inaccurate activity or whatnot and question it right away. It's easy to let things go. It's easy not to double check these things, but you have to do that if you want to kind of like catch mistakes. Nobody's going to do these things for you, and it's kind of like a part of growing up. So that's that case. This is a case that I like a lot, and I usually test on it. So I want you to know that case. Also know that endorsement means signature. So what does endorsement mean? It means the signature. So just also know that as well. What else here? Defenses to.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
But the Watson and Coding case,
Yeah.
does it represent good faith?
It's not so much good faith. It represents, if I was to ask you something about it, it's that without reason to question authenticity, like things will go through. There was no fraud here. It's not a question of fraud. It's kind of like a question of it's a combination of the lack of notice and there's no reason to question authenticity. Things are going to go through. Okay. Defenses. What are some defenses? So if somebody wants to make a claim about these things, what are some defenses? Well, then the person perhaps, it's the same defenses that you've heard before in a contractual sense. If the person was an infant under 18 when they signed a document, a check, or made that transfer, if they were mentally incapacitated, if there was fraud involved, or if it wasn't an authorized signature, or perhaps it was an authorized signature that was then actually made fraudulent. One of the things that we've seen in the court system when it comes to wills, let's say, is perhaps a fraudulent signature. When you're signing a will and you're leaving your stuff to somebody else, whether it's a person or an entity, you have to sign at the end of that document. What if somebody, a friend of yours or a neighbor, knows that you are an elderly person, your wits are not all about you, they sign your name and making it seem like you're giving everything to that person? Well, if there's a fraud, that's fraud, right? That's an unauthorized signature. That is not a properly executed document. So those are the things that we would look for in a contract. It would also be applied here. Okay, and that's it. So that's it for chapter 25. As you can see, not that much. Chapter 26 and 27 also relatively similar in nature. So we're going to just move right along. So when we talk about chapter 26 is the liability of the parties. So once a person signs an instrument, it means that the liability is shifted. You are obligated to pay. If I sign a check over to somebody else, or if I send money over, I'm liable to pay that money. So If I am signing on behalf of somebody else, I must have that authority to sign on somebody's behalf. If I'm signing on behalf of my organization or whatnot, once I affix my signature to it, or once I click send and send that, I am now putting I'm obligated to make that payment. So therefore I am liable. If I'm trying to now take that money back, I have to show why that should be done. So the burden is going to be on me to kind of undo what I did. I have the facie case on that. Again, that's why you're always careful before you sign that check. You always careful before you sign that button to send something, because you have the liability then, and you have the burden to show that it was not done properly or whatnot. Signature or authorization is either going to be done by you as the owner of that asset or an authorized agent. If somebody is sending money on your behalf who was not authorized to do so, then that's considered fraudulent. They didn't have the authority. So you should be able to get that money back. So if somebody steals your identity, if somebody steals your credit card, why are you able to recover that money when you call up that credit card company? It's because that person who used your credit card was not authorized to make those purchases. So you are not liable. This is where the basis is. An unauthorized use, you get the credit for that. It's a pain. You have to call, you have to make a claim, you have to talk about what happened, right? But you are not obligated to make those payments on those things because the person who used it was not an authorized user. Sometimes we make sometimes you authorize somebody, you give them a certain authority, right? So let's say you have a company and you have your assistant is authorized to write checks on your behalf, and the bank knows that so and so is authorized to make those payments or write those checks or pay those bills. When that person leaves and you have another employee in their place, it's your obligation to notify the financial institution that this person is no longer authorized to write those checks. Because if this person has that relationship and they start paying for their own bills, let's say, like what happened with Watson versus American Express, you may have that problem. So you have the burden, or it's the liabilities on you to notify now these financial institutions of these changes that are taking place. Don't don't think that things are automatic, that they're going to happen on their own, then the banks are going to know. Banks are operated by people like you and I, right? So I'm a firm believer of always being proactive. And in order to make sure things are done properly, you need to take those necessary steps. When we talk about payment, right? Payment obviously is when you pay whatever amount is due. If you try to cancel something or renouncing, changing your mind, you have to call that financial institution if you're writing a check. Or if I've never tried to undo a payment through Venmo or Zelle, so I don't know how easy or difficult that is. I don't know if it's instantaneous, but I don't know with what ease it is to kind of get your money back. So if anybody has tried and would like to chime in, you're more than welcome to do so. But again, that's why.
Um,
Go ahead.
not with Venmo or Cash App, but I've had issues with my debit card a couple of times where I check my bank account and I see payments. I've seen payments that I know I didn't make. I called the bank and they returned me the money, but still I don't even know how it
That's
happened.
weird. So is it like a pending thing that goes away after a while, or is it somebody on that doesn't have the authority has been using your card, or
No, it happened two times. The first time it was just pending, so I changed my bank account and it didn't go through. But the second time it actually did go through and like money was taken off my account.
mm.
I changed the credit card and they gave me credit back. They did an investigation and whatever, but I still never knew.
Yeah, sometimes when you have information, I just had this conversation with my dad. Like when you have your credit card information, uh That's right, Munir. When whether it's identity stolen or through the dark web or whatever it is, people get access to your credit card information and then they start making these purchases. Somebody stole like my Disney app information, like just so they, and then I saw like these extra charges. So it's like you have to be vigilant and aware, have alerts on your thing. That way you can call and take care of it. And yeah, they do an investigation to see who's, where the fault is, because obviously they don't also want to pay for things that are not actually fraudulent. Like if you're trying to scam somebody, they don't want to have to pay for that. So they do their investigation to make sure it's kind of legit. So you always just be aware, be vigilant of these things, to make sure you don't get overcharged or nothing fraudulent that happens on your account. Let me just see here. 26, cancellation, liability. All right. I'm going to move on to chapter 27. This is going to be a really short class. Actually, let me give you your thing for today, attendance purposes. Let's see here. So for attendance purposes for today, I got to write this down so I don't forget. Phrases. Okay. So April 26, 2021. The secret phrase for tonight is, it is so quiet when Simon is sleeping. It is so quiet when Simon is sleeping. One more time. It is so quiet when Simon is sleeping. So that is your secret phrase from today. If anybody has them listed as like a Word document, if you want to tell me what number this is, are you guys almost at the 9?
For me, it's number 9 already because the first
This is
time you
number
took
9.
attendance,
Right.
you took
This is
attendance.
This is
number
9.
9, yeah.
Okay. So actually, if you have now the 9 phrases, because the first day I took attendance. So if you have the day that I took attendance and you were here, and now 9 phrases, Christopher, I see you looking perplexed. Do you have a question?
I count 8.
Okay. Did you do the one for last week?
Yeah, and I've never missed a class.
It is true, it's 8. The thing is that I counted the first phrase
Oh, the
as
first.
attendance
They're
taken
9
by
with the
Okay.
first
professor.
class when you took
No.
attendance.
So you have to have, so it's the first class plus 9 phrases.
Oh.
So it's first class plus 9 phrases, because the first class, I'm giving you credit that 10. So if today is your 9th phrase, but if it's your 9th day of attendance, then next week you'll have your 9th phrase plus that first day of attendance. So once you have your 9th phrase, then you can email it to me, all 10 of them, and that way I can put down on your attendance participation portion of your grade, I can give you that 100. If you missed 1 or 2 classes, you're good, Christopher. So I'm glad you brought that point up. If you missed 1 or 2 classes, just keep attending the next couple of lectures, because once you have, you want to send it in when you're sure you're going to get 100, because 100 is going to be that 10% of your grade, which is going to help boost up your grade. So just make sure you do that. Okay, so let's move on to the last chapter for the evening. Okay, which is chapter 27. Okay, this is something I always ask on. When you deposit a check in the account, whether it's through a real check, like a physical paper check, or whether you are actually taking a picture and, taking a picture and then putting it into your thing, you usually get a provisional credit. What is a provisional credit? That's what I want you to know. If you were to tell me what a provisional credit is, what would that be?
When you deposit a check, it's usually pending until, let's say, sometimes 1 day, sometimes 2 days. I know it depends when you deposit it, before business hours or after business hour ends. So I think this is the time pending where you cannot really withdraw this money until the bank finalize the payment.
So I like the word temporary. So it's a temporary deposit on your account. You cannot use that money, really, not the whole thing. Thank you. Somebody just wrote it. Excellent. It's a temporary credit until the actual balance hits. Let me just see here. That's right. You have to make this payment bank. They provide me a provisional credit until you receive your money. That's right. And so that's what it is. So I usually ask about what that is. So I would like you to know that. So again, hold on, where are you here? A provisional credit is just a temporary credit until it's all, they make sure that that money's actually still there. And then sometimes that's why those scams, kind of happen, because you can get the money for a little bit, but you think it's there, but it's actually not, because the money was never there. And when you always, back in the day, there used to be relationships between the bank and the customer. And right now, a lot of it are these big banks and stuff. So what happens if you were to write, if it's not a mom and pop, if it's a Chase or something like that, and you write out a check, but you actually don't have the funds to pay? What happens when you write out a check, but you don't actually have the money to pay it?
You can postpone the date on the check.
Well, let's say you already wrote out a check and you gave it to somebody and they tried to cash it. What's gonna happen to you?
Bounces.
It's gonna bounce. It's gonna
Bounces,
bounce.
yeah. Charge the other person like $25.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a funny story. I'm not going to mention names because it's Staten Island. So my friend, for her wedding, my best friend, it was her wedding, right? So obviously she invites people. And so she invited this person, and she gave her a +1. So the girl went to the wedding and she gave her a check, right? She gave her a check for $300. It bounced. So my friend was notified, like, hey, this check that you just deposited bounced. The person who wrote out the check was notified. She never gave her money. So she's like, not only did she come, because I could have just invited her herself, her and her +1 ended up screwing my friend, because they kind of went in and they got nothing. So every time we mention this guest, that's what now we think about, the +1 and $300 check that bounced.
And your friend ended up paying extra $25
That's right.
on the
She
bounced
paid
check.
extra.
Which I don't understand till now why they should do that, the banks.
They
Why
don't
don't
want
they
you
charge the
to.
original? No.
They have to, because they had to go through depositing that check. They had to go through that process, and so they had to do work. So they screw you in the process as well. I remember back in the day with financials, and this is something that when my husband and I were planning our wedding, and I was not like so great with money, and I just write checks out, like whatever. And the last check I gave the hall, also I didn't have enough funds in there, but I like just write out checks. I don't actually, like, I wasn't balancing my checkbook at that time. That was embarrassing. That was very embarrassing. It was the one time it happened, and it happened to be a big amount. So we're like, no, 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 here's the cash. We have the money. Sorry about that. So you always want to make sure that you have funds in there before you write out a check. So lessons learned. And now with Venmo and all these things, you see exactly how much is in there. Although sometimes I write out a check or write whatever out, but like if I write out a check to their school or something, they don't deposit things right away. Go away right now. Let me finish, and then you can talk. So, so that's that. Okay, hold on here. Also, just as an FYI, because I think actually this is going to be the last thing here. I don't see duty of care warranties. Yeah. Duty to act, warranty. If you write out a check and you have a problem with it, you can always contact your financial institution to try to put a stop payment on it, but usually you'll pay a fee for that. If checks went out and they're fraudulent, you can always try to get the bank to stop those financial institutions. If it's a small store, like a small bank, or it's not like those big ticket items where they have these gigantic legal departments, and you have those relationships, like on Staten Island, a lot of the banks, who the people are, and so you can have those relationships with them. They can help you out with certain things, but sometimes policy is policy. So if you write a check and there's no funds there, maybe if you have that relationship with them, they can waive the fee one time. But if you're writing out checks on a regular basis that bounce, probably not. But once in a while, there's no problem. They have these things where it's overdraft. So if you have that and you write out a check, but there's no money in there, but you have another account, they'll cover that, and then that will be fine. So that's pretty much it. The stuff that I want you to know. And again, there's not that much stuff that I really test on because I don't think it's as relevant today. Next week, however, when we do start talking about agency, we that stuff I test a lot on, because we're talking about agency and we're getting into voting rights and companies and corporations and things of that sort. And I feel that's a lot more relevant to you, and you can get a lot more out of that. So we'll spend a lot more time and a lot more detail on this. So if you haven't been reading, I urge you to read, because again, all this material stuff from next week, is a lot of it is going to be on your final exam. So I want to make sure that you're reading this stuff. So agency, limited liability companies, corporations, why we do bylaws between entities, what the relevance for that is, how to set up a corporation, how to get the EIN number, all that little nitty gritty stuff, especially because what I've been finding over the past few years is students who take this class are either in a business, a family business of some sort, or they're looking to have their own business or be entrepreneurs. So the stuff that we're going to talk about next week is actually really helpful for that. So if you have questions on opening up your own business, you could come prepared and ask those things. And I've heard it more than once that after we talk about all that stuff, a student will say, I wish I had taken this class or learned about this prior to starting my own online company business with a partner, because I ended up getting screwed. So I can't guarantee I'm going to prevent you from getting screwed if you enter into a business relationship with a family member or a friend, but at least I can give you some pointers of things to kind of keep in mind. Okay? Does anybody have any questions on anything we covered? We didn't cover that much today, so it was a really pretty easy day, and there's still light out, so you can go enjoy life. All right. Well, I will see you all next week. Have a great evening, everyone.
You
Good night.
too. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
one, Professor.
Good night.
Good night. You're welcome. Good night.